Welcome to Coping with Ghosting, the podcast that provides hope, healing, and understanding for anyone who's been ghosted. I'm your host, Greta, and today's topic is Post Betrayal Transformation, or PBT. My guest is Dr. Debi Silber. Dr. Silber is the founder of the PBT Institute and is a holistic psychologist, a health, mindset, and personal development expert, and is a two-time #1 international best-selling author. Her podcast, From Betrayal to Breakthrough, is also globally ranked within the top 1.5% of podcasts. Her recent PhD study on how we experience betrayal made 3 groundbreaking discoveries that changes how long it takes to heal. In addition to being on Fox, CBS, The Dr. Oz Show, TEDx twice, and more, she's an award-winning speaker and coach dedicated to helping people move past their betrayals as well as any other blocks preventing them from the health, work, relationships, confidence, and happiness they want most. Dr. Silber, thank you for joining me.
Looking forward to this conversation. Please call me Debbie.
I'd love for you to share your story with listeners. How and why did you become an expert in betrayal?
Yeah. So I don't think anybody says, I think I like the topic of betrayal. Let me study that. No. You study because you have to. I've been in business 32 years, health, mindset, personal development. And then I had a painful betrayal from my family and thought I did everything I needed to do to heal from that. And then it happened again a few years later. This time it was my husband. So anybody who's been through that, you're shocked, you're devastated, blindsided. That's how I was. And so I got him out of the house. That was the deal breaker. I looked at the two experiences thinking, well, what's similar here? Of course me, but what else? And I realized that I never even was like on my own to-do list. It was always about everybody else. So here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving business. And I decided to go back for a PhD. Like there was no book on this. There was no program on this. So I decided to just get a whole PhD in it. And then it was time to do a study. So I studied, it was in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of transformation and human potential. And then I had to do a study. So I studied betrayal. And honestly, I studied it just to get myself out of this jam so I could be better for my kids and my clients. And I did not see this coming, but that study made 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my family, my work, my life.
And what were the key findings?
So the first one was, I had a feeling that betrayal was a different type of trauma. I'd been through death of a loved one. I'd been through disease, but I was like, betrayal feels different. I didn't want to assume it was the same for all my study participants. So I asked them, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? And every single one of them said, oh my gosh, it's so different. And here's why. Because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the whole entire self gets shattered and has to be rebuilt. Rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust, they're shattered. So that type of healing needed its own name because you're not only rebuilding your life, which is the invitation with all traumas, but you also have to rebuild yourself. So I coined a new term, post-betrayal transformation, the complete and total rebuild of your life and yourself after an experience with betrayal. So that betrayal is a different type of trauma. That was the first discovery. Want me to go to the second one?
Oh, and also, I guess I wonder if you could just define betrayal for the listeners. Like, what's
Yeah,
your
sure.
definition of it?
My definition is it's the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. And every relationship has them. But the way it works is the more you trust and the more you depend on that person, the deeper the betrayal. So let's take a child who's totally dependent on their parent and the parent does something awful. That's going to have a different impact than, let's say, your best friend sharing your secret, your coworker taking credit for your idea. They're both betrayals, but there's a different kind of level of cleanup left in the wake, different level of magnitude. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And ghosting is betrayal.
Absolutely, because you had this spoken or unspoken agreement. We're dating, we're seeing each other, we're married, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, where are they? That is definitely a betrayal. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's that, and what's unique to betrayal is the shock. It's like someone just takes a mask off. It's like we think we
Yeah.
know this person, and then without our awareness or consent, all of a sudden it's like, what happened? Here I was going along with the spoken or unspoken rules. What happened? Where'd you go? So absolutely, it's a betrayal. And it's that shock piece that lands on our body, our mind, our heart. That's why it requires a very different way to heal. And that's also why it leaves us with a lot of these symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome. That was the second discovery. Want me to go through that one?
Oh, absolutely. What are the symptoms?
Yeah. So, this was another one where I thought, well, it's really interesting how it seems like people who are struggling to heal from betrayal all kind of have the same symptoms, and they do. And we have our post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent someone's struggling. We've had, I think, over 95,000 people take it. And a few things
Wow.
about that. The first thing is we've all been taught time heals all wounds. Well, I have the proof that when it comes to betrayal, that's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true. You can't count on time. You can't count on a new relationship to heal betrayal.
Mhm.
You need to intentionally and deliberately heal it, because until and unless you do, it will follow you around in every relationship you have. So, and I'll mention the symptoms, but that's a really big misconception. And there's a question on the quiz that says, "Is there anything else you'd like to share?" And people write things like, "My betrayal happened 35 years ago and I'm unwilling to trust." My betrayal happened 10 years ago. It feels like it happened yesterday. So we see betrayal is this long lasting, without intentionally healing it, this long lasting event that seeps into everything you do.
Mhm.
So anyway, every few months I pull the stats from the quiz. Happy to share them.
I
So,
would, yeah.
okay. So imagine 95,000 people, men, women, just about every country's represented here. So, and pay attention to these numbers because they're super high. 78%, we're talking out of 95,000 people, 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 94% deal with painful triggers. And if you've ever had a trigger, they can take you right down. The most common physical symptoms: 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% have extreme fatigue. Your adrenals have crashed. You wake up in the morning, you're exhausted, you slept all night, doesn't matter. 47% have weight changes. So maybe in the beginning, you can't hold food down. Later
Mhm.
on, you're emotionally eating, you're using food for comfort.
Mhm.
45% have a digestive issue. That could be anything: Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, constipation, diarrhea, you name it. The most common mental symptoms: 78% are overwhelmed. 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief. 64% are in shock. 62% can't concentrate. So imagine you can't concentrate. You're exhausted. You have a gut issue. You still have to work. You still have to raise your kids. You still have to, do what you have to do. That's not even emotionally. Emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness. 83% are very angry. You can go back and forth between those two all day long. 79% are stressed. Just a few more. Here's why I wrote the book Trust Again. This one got me. 84% have an inability to trust. 84%. Think about how that will impact you. 67% are preventing themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
Ugh. This is painful to listen to. It's so upsetting and sad.
I mean, the good news is you can heal from all of it.
Yeah.
And that's the third discovery. What's even more staggering about those numbers, you didn't hear me say 20%, 30%. These numbers are
Yeah.
super high.
Yeah.
They're also not necessarily from a recent betrayal.
Ugh.
This could be from that parent who did something awful when you were a kid. This could be from that partner who broke your heart in high school. So think about this. That person may not know, care, remember. They may not even be alive. And here we are, decades later, with
Mm.
symptoms because of
Mhm.
something left unhealed. The good news is
Mhm.
you can heal from all of it. That's
Yeah.
the third discovery. Yeah. And just to really show what, like, the extent of how long this stuff can last. We have a person in our community, woman in our community. She's in her mid 80s. She had a 70-plus-year digestive issue from
Mm.
a family betrayal when she was a little kid. So imagine a digestive issue for 70 plus years. 2 weeks into our program, she healed from a 70 plus year digestive issue.
I just got chills. That's incredible.
I mean, that's what happens because we're doing the same thing, thinking, well, time will heal it, right? No. So when I explain the third discovery and walk you through it, you will see exactly why we can have symptoms for 70 years if we're not careful. Want me to go through the third one?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. For me, this was the most exciting. And what we learned was while we can stay stuck for years, decades, 70, years more, a lifetime, if we're going to fully heal. And by fully heal, I mean those symptoms of post betrayal syndrome, like I just shared, to this completely rebuilt place called post betrayal transformation, we're going to go through 5 proven predictable stages.
Mm.
And what's even more exciting about that is we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every stage. And we know what's needed in order to move from one stage to the next. Healing has now become entirely predictable. And I'm happy to share the stages if you want to hear them.
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. Because that would have been really awkward if you said no. Okay. So, all right. So this is all we do within the PBT Institute. This is all our coaches are, everything they're certified in. It's written in trust again. I'm going to give you a boiled down version of it right here. So stage 1 is before it happens. And if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with everybody, me too, was a heavy lean on the physical and mental, thinking and doing. We're so good at that. And kind of neglecting or ignoring the emotional and the spiritual, feeling and being. Well, if a table only has 2 legs, it's easy for that table to topple over, right? That's us. Stage 2, shock, trauma, D-Day, discovery day, like the day you get ghosted, right?
Yeah.
And this is the scariest out of all of the stages. Here's the shock right here. And it's the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. So right here, you've ignited the stress response. You're now headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. You cannot wrap your mind around what just happened. Like, this makes no sense. Like, how could this person be in my life today and yesterday and today? Where are they? Right? It's like that. And your worldview is completely shattered. Your worldview, those are the rules that govern you, that prevent chaos. Trust this person. Go here, don't go there, don't do that, do this, right? And in one earth-shattering moment or series of moments, every rule you've been holding to be real and true is no longer. The bottom has bottomed out on you, and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. This is terrifying. But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You grab hold of anyone or anything, right? In order to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this? Who can I trust? Here's the trap though. Stage 3, by far, is the most common place we get stuck. And here's why. Once we've figured out how to survive our experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where we just came from, we think it's good. We're like, okay, I got it. And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we don't know there's a stage 4 or stage 5, right? We don't know that. So we plant roots here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And then 4 things start to happen. The first thing is we start getting these small self benefits. We get to be right. We get our story. We love our story. We get someone to blame. We get a target for our anger. We get sympathy from everyone we tell our story to. On and on and on. And on some level, we feel we're not getting much else, so we take this. And so we plant deeper roots. We're not supposed to, but we don't know. And now, because we're here longer than we should be, the mind starts doing things like, maybe you're not that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that, right? And so we plant deeper roots. And now, because we're here longer than we should be, and these are the thoughts we're thinking, well, this is the energy we start putting out. And like energy attracts like energy, right? So now we start calling people and circumstances and even new relationships towards us to confirm, yep, this is where you belong. Like right here is where you join that lame support group, and you will actually sabotage your healing because you found your people. This is where you go back to the betrayer who has no intention of changing because you're afraid to be alone. You see? It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go. We're miserable, but we're like, I got to get through my day, right?
Yeah.
So right here, we start numbing, avoiding, distracting. So right here, we start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, whatever, to numb, avoid, and distract ourselves from this painful place. So we do it for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years, and 70 years, right? And I can
Yeah.
see someone 20 years later and say, that emotional eating you're doing or that numbing, whatever. Do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? They look at me like I'm crazy.
Mm.
They say it happened 20 years ago. What are you talking about? All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So how do people get out of stage 3?
Yeah. And that stage 3 is, I wrote a whole book on stage 3, From Hardened to Healed, because I was like, you've been through the worst of it already. Why in the world are you settling for the worst place to be after your experience? You owe it to yourself to have that transformation, which is waiting for you in stages 4 and 5. Anyway, if you're willingness is a big word right here, willing to grieve the loss, let go of your story, let go of a bunch of different things. A few things you have to do. You can move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal.
Mm-hmm.
So here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo what happened, but I control what I do with it. Right there in that decision, you're turning down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but at least you stop the massive damage you were accumulating in stages 2 and stage 3. Stage 4 feels like if you've ever moved. If you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, like all your stuff's not there, it's not cozy yet, but you're like, we can do this, we got this, okay. It feels like that. But what's so interesting is if you were to move, you don't take everything with you, right? Like you don't take those things that don't represent who you want to be once you're
Yeah.
in this new space. And what I found was if your friends weren't there for you, you're done with them right here. That lame support group, you're done. That betrayer who won't change, you're done. And that's why people say to me all the time, what the heck? I've had these friends 10, 20, 30 years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. And if they don't rise, they don't come. So changing relationships really common as we move from stage 3 to stage 4. Anyway, when we settle into this new space, we make it cozy, we make it kind of mentally home. We move into the 5th most beautiful stage, and this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. We didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. We were surviving. Now we do. Your mind is healing. We're making new rules, new boundaries, based on everything we see so clearly now. And we have a new worldview based on the road we just traveled. And the 4 legs of the table, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
That's great. It's brilliant. And it's so wonderful that it's a predictable journey.
It really is. I mean, that's what's so beautiful. Like in the PBT Institute, everything is numbered according to stages. Like you go to stage 3 classes, you see stage 3 coaches, you do stage 3, program until you get to stage 4. And then you do all that until you get to stage 5. And it's so beautiful because you even check off things like did this, and you know exactly what you would have had to do in order to move to the next stage. And then you have we have this milestones and marker, this amazing sheet that really shows us this. If you have not checked off all these things, you're just do this to get to the next stage. So everybody knows they are fully and completely moving through the stages instead of just only addressing it from, let's say, one level. Like we have so many people coming in with therapy trauma, well-meaning therapists, but they don't know the 5 stages. So if anything is going to glue you to stage 3, it's endlessly unpacking your story, right?
Right.
Without a strategic plan to move forward. So the most well-meaning, you feel heard, you feel understood, you feel validated, but that's it, so that's a stage 3 thing. So it's important. It has a role, but we just move everybody through the stages.
Right. That's great. When it comes to ghosting, oftentimes the person who vanished
Mhm.
returns, and it
Mm.
really feels impossible to trust them when they want to re-enter
Yeah.
our lives. Um, in my experiences, I've had ghosts come back, and I just can't believe that they're not going to suddenly disappear again. So, in your work, you discuss how you see trust as a brick wall. Can
Mm.
you share more about that?
Yeah. I mean, and how could you trust that person?
Right?
Trust is, like you said, I use that analogy a lot. I look at trust like a brick wall, where every opportunity someone has to show that they're trustworthy, that's like one brick in that brick wall. And I don't know of any other way a brick wall can be built, by except brick by brick by brick, so it's like every opportunity someone has to show that they're trustworthy, that's a brick, another brick, another brick, another brick. And then all of a sudden they ghost you. Well, then that's the whole wall coming down, right?
Yeah.
So if trust is that brick wall and they just shattered that brick wall and then they come back, you're looking at this rubble of bricks now. Now, you don't have to do anything with it. You can walk away, totally fine. But if that person, if you want to feel safe and trust that person, then that person, the one who shattered the brick wall, has to be a really good bricklayer, you know, and put the bricks up the same way the first time, brick by brick by brick. Here's the mistake, though. I see so many people who've been ghosted, right? Who've been betrayed. The ghoster, the betrayer, doesn't really have much of an interest in doing the work to repair. And I
Yeah.
don't even think trust can be repaired, it has to be rebuilt. They're really not interested in doing the work to rebuild. So the one who's been ghosted, the one who's been betrayed is like, fine, I'll do it. No, 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 no. That's why you don't feel safe. That's why you don't trust. That's not your job to do. Your job, if you wanted to, would be to be willing to watch that brick wall be rebuilt. But for you to rebuild what someone else destroyed, no. Now, you're rebuilding yourself for sure. But when it comes to rebuilding an entirely new relationship, that has so much to do with that other person.
Mhm. And what are some of the signs that they are willing to rebuild? Like, what is a healthy rebuilding of the wall?
Yeah. We have actually, it's called Rebuild. That's our program for the betrayer. And certainly not everybody would be interested in a program like that. Like the person who's just on to the next would never in a billion years be interested in that program. But this is like for the person who realizes I just shattered the heart and the trust of the very person that loves me the most and that I love the most. And I'm disgusted with who I am and I want to become someone I'm proud of. So it's so interesting because at first, when people were asking me to create that program, I was like, I don't know. Do I even want to be doing a program like this? And I, I'm meeting with the betrayers. And I'll tell you, it is one of my most, I look forward to those calls. I meet with them, they meet with our coaches and everything and have their own community and programs, but I meet with them every month. And I love it because these are people who, because I'm giving them the playbook. This is what you say, this is what you do, this is what you never say, this is what you never do. And they are listening so intently and they're really taking it in. And one of the biggest things that I see with them, and this is to answer your question, is a willingness. A willingness. Same thing with the betrayed, too. They have to be willing to let go of their story and rebuild themselves. But for the betrayer, they have to be willing to let go of the habits, behaviors, everything that they've created. They have to be willing to change that. They have to be willing to look at who they've been. They have to be willing to really go into those dark places and say, why did I do that? What was I thinking? And here's the thing. I see this with a lot of betrayers. They betrayed. They're like, oh, well, they make excuses for the betrayer. Well, they've been, they were traumatized. They had they had this going on, that going on. Well, so has the betrayed, but why did they not make those choices too? I'm not saying it's not a valid reason for them to get support around that, but that does not justify betrayal ever,
Thank you for
ever.
saying that. Yeah, I hear that too all the time.
It's not an excuse. It's not. It's like, I mean, so it's a when you're even considering that, that should be the clue. I need to get some support around this, because to shatter the heart and trust of the person I love the most just because I have unhealed stuff going on, no, no, you're doing such tremendous damage that, and what is left in the wake for the betrayed to move through is otherworldly. It's like, when I look at betrayal, I think it is one of the hardest of the human experiences. I mean, I can only imagine like death of a child being worse,
Yeah.
and thankfully I've never been through that. But because think about it, this was the person, or these were the people who gave you a sense of safety and security. So if this is the person who gave you that sense of safety and security, and they're the ones taking it away, and this is after years or decades of complete and total 100% trust. I mean, what a violation. What a violation. And the beauty, though, is when I see someone moving through stage 4 and stage 5, I don't think I've seen stronger people, because they have intentionally and deliberately rebuilt themselves. It's so beautiful to watch, because when this happens, what they're doing is they're taking a look at every thought that comes in, every belief that they have,
Yeah.
every choice they make, and they're assessing. That was the old me. Does this still work? No, I'm letting it go. If it looks and suits this new version of me, okay. If not, and that's the same opportunity for the betrayer. And that's why, we have so many people going through a reclaim program for the betrayed, a rebuild program for the betrayer.
Mhm.
They meet up again as two very different people. That's a 2.0 relationship.
That's really, really incredible. Wow. I love what you've built and created around this. And everybody send your ghosts who return over to Debbie.
and many of them they will ghost this program, because they
Oh,
don't want to look at themselves, right? They don't want to take a look and own what they've done, and so they don't heal. And here's the thing too, and the betrayed isn't going to like this, but I can only speak very straight. So if you're allowing this, you're enabling both of you and preventing both of you from healing, from doing the deep work that's needed to heal. And I'll tell you, there were 3 groups in the study who did not heal. One, this was the group, they had their story, they were sticking with it. They didn't heal. Number 2, this was the group, the second group, this was the group where they ran to the doctor, put them on a mood stabilizer, anti-anxiety medication. They were numbing, may have made the day a bit easier to get through, not without a price. They didn't heal. The third group, this was the group where the betrayed, let's say the ghoster, doesn't have any consequences, very little consequences. The person who was hurt just tried to turn the other way, look the other way, whatever. And I saw 2 things, and it was usually out of financial fear, not wanting to break up a family, religious reasons, fear of change, whatever. But I saw 2 things: a further deterioration of the relationship, and number 2, that group had the most symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome. Your broken heart can't handle that. But we're so afraid of the death of the old. That's the only way you birth the new. Whether that's, and just to close the loop on my story, so everybody knows, um, whether you rebuild yourself and move along, and that's what I did with my family. They weren't changing, but I was. So that was the end. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something from the ground up, new, with the person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. So not long ago, as 2 totally transformed people, we married each other again. New rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids as our bridal party. And for those of you now who are thinking, oh, she sold out or whatever, look, you can imagine what I hear. It was by far, hands down, the hardest thing I've ever done. And the only reason why I was able to do that was because I moved into stage 5, and he did on his own as well. So
wow.
when we met up again, it was as 2 completely healed and changed people.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. And I just heard your story in your book, Trust Again. So it's really powerful. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that with everyone. It is really turning pain into purpose and helping everyone with what you've been through. And I know listeners here will appreciate it. And we should all go listen to your podcast too, because it's so incredible. Read your books, join the programs, everything.
Thank you so much. It's that when the 5 stages showed up, and I'm a very private person, I was like, I don't keep that to myself. And so I put it in a program and it blew up. And then everyone wanted to work with me. And I was like, what do I do now? But I wanted to get the 5 stages into everybody's hands, coaches,
Yeah.
doctors, therapists. So I created our certification program. And then I was like, wait a second, I did the research. I know what works. What would happen if we put everything that works under one roof, excluding everything else? And that's the PBT Institute. And it was so interesting because, especially with writing Trust Again, I set the whole family down. I'm like, this is, I don't know what's going to happen here. And I thought that the kids would be like, oh, come on, mom. They were, they were really behind it. My biggest supporter was my husband.
Oh.
Yeah, he's like, you're going to help so many people and you're going to show them that people can change. And that's how I knew he was totally different, because if he, and like many betrayers, if they're like, no, 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 don't let the kids know, don't let our friends know, don't do, then that's about them. That's not a
Mm.
person who's ready and willing to really, really change.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you have any final things that you'd like to share with the listeners about ghosting or being ghosted?
Yeah, and I say this for the betrayed too. If it's not a ghosting thing, but if it is, it's sort of the same thing, and it's a mantra. And if you have to repeat this a million times, it's worth it. Even though it happened to you, it's not about you. It's not about you. This is someone else's weakness. This is someone else's unhealed whatever. This is someone else's issue. It's a great opportunity for us to always look and say, what do I want for next time? What am I maybe not realizing? Am I not realizing how lovable, worthy, deserving I am? Like, we want to take a look to see what we can learn from the experience, but what you don't want to do is just assume that it's about you, because it's not.
I agree 100%. Thank you for those wise words. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. Everything is at the PBT, as in Post Betrayal Transformation, the PBT Institute.com.
Perfect. And I'm just so impressed with what you've accomplished. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thanks so much.
And listeners, I invite you to become a part of the Coping with Ghosting community. Follow Coping with Ghosting on social media, join the free and private Facebook support group, and share this podcast with anyone you know who's been ghosted or betrayed. I'd also really appreciate it if you could please leave a rating and review for this show. Your feedback helps spread a message of hope. And finally, be sure to remember, when you're ghosted, you have more time to connect with yourself and with people who have stellar communication skills. You deserve the best.